when it comes down to it, what's with the Scott Boras stuff now? What Trevor Bauer threw out there? What was he was obviously referring to? I guess the email that the Associated Press obtained. Basically, Boras saying the owners aren't talking about losing money in a playing season. They're talking about not having the money to pay off the debt that Major League Baseball allowed them to use to jack up the price of their team or the valuation of their team. And your salaries would be viewed as a bailout. This is what the math that he said. What about that, Tom?
Yeah, well, first of all, Scott has and should have tremendous influence in this game based on his track record, how long he's been in the game, the clientele that he has. I mean, the dude signed, $1 billion worth of contracts this past offseason. He clearly has the ear of Tony Clark. He has 3 players who are on the union's executive board. No other agent has more than 1. So he does have an outside influence as far as an agent in the union's matters go. So I don't see that necessarily as a negative thing. And again, I think he's been the one sort of rallying players. He came out with his email. I didn't see much from Tony Clark, but you heard Scott Boras loud and clear. Now, as you said, he's saying the owner's problem is, listen, these people took out loans to renovate their stadiums, to build ballpark villages, and even to purchase teams, and that's their mistake. Well, that's not entirely true. Their mistake, if there is a mistake, is what every business is finding now. It's called a global pandemic. Everybody, if you ran a restaurant and you took out a loan to renovate your restaurant, are you going to blame the pandemic because your business is down? This is really unprecedented times, emotionally and especially economically. And I think what he needs to do, Scott, and all of the union in general, is where is the common ground? Basically, I think players and owners need to invest in one another for the good of the sport going forward. Not to say who's right or who's wrong in May of 2020, but what does this sport look like, Rich, if there's no baseball this year? If you as a fan are watching, say, the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, tennis, golf, you name it, baseball from Japan, Korea, soccer across the world, and there's no baseball because baseball players and owners could not agree on economics, not safety protocols, economics, splitting up the money during a pandemic. What do you think that does for the game going forward? What does it do for free agency this offseason? What does it do for next year in terms of negotiating towards a new CBA, which expires at the end of next year? What does it do for clubs who are trying to sell sponsorship and advertising after essentially 17 to 19 months of baseball going dark and people being out of the habit of following baseball? I mean, that is a bleak landscape if you're talking about baseball being the only sport that is not out there, or at least trying to find a way to put their sport out in front of the public. And again, I'm going to use my restaurant analogy again. If your favorite restaurant closes for a year-long renovation, guess what? You get into the habit of finding another restaurant, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a scary thing for restaurants to be down for that long. And if baseball does not give people the option of following the game for a year and a half, I'm afraid a lot of people will have moved on.
See, and I'll ask you the same question I asked our colleague at ESPN, Jeff Passan, when he was on yesterday. It sure feels like this is a CBA negotiation, that because one is coming up next year, that there's a lot of territory being staked out for the motherlode conversation next year that appears to now be front-loaded now at the worst possible time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, Rich, and I think, I don't know if this is possible. I mean, I hate to even propose ideas that would, quote-unquote, help solve a very complex labor dispute.
Yes.
But, go back to 1981 when we had that 2-month player strike, and part of the settlement was that they agreed to extend the CBA by a year, essentially for the same reason you just brought up, because things are so toxic right now, it's going to be hard to get to a new, huge overall agreement. So just kind of put it off for another year. So I agree that you can't think about these negotiations without thinking about the next CBA being right around the corner.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.